In 1978, China was broken. The average person lived on less than $200 a year. People were starving. The economy was smaller than Italy's. Fast forward 40 years, that same country is now the second largest economy on Earth. They built more skyscrapers in 20 years than America built in its entire history. They lifted 800 million people out of poverty. It is the single greatest economic miracle of all time. But here is the crazy part. It didn't start with a war, and it didn't start with the discovery of oil. It started with a 5-foot-tall man who asked a very dangerous question. What if we kept the communism, but added a little bit of money? Sir, that's illegal. Let's call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. To understand the rise, you have to understand the disaster. Mao Zedong had just died. The Cultural Revolution left the country paralyzed. There was no food, no technology, and no friends. Sir, the people are hungry. I know. And the Americans won't trade with us. I know. And we don't know how to build factories. Then we need to open the door, just a crack. Deng Xiaoping had a famous saying, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." Translation? I don't care if it's capitalism or communism. I just want to eat. But you can't just turn a communist ship around overnight. So Deng decided to run an experiment. He picked 4 cities on the coast, most famously a swampy fishing village called Shenzhen, and declared them special economic zones. Basically, inside this fence, the rules didn't apply. Inside the fence, you could own a business, you could keep your profits, and most importantly, foreign companies could come in. Wait, so I can hire your workers for $1 a day? Yes. And I don't have to deal with unions? No unions. And the land is free? First 5 years, free. Where do I sign? It worked. Foreign money flooded in. Shenzhen went from a population of 30,000 to 12 million in 3 decades. It became the hardware capital of the world. The experiment was a success. So Deng took down the fence and applied it to the whole country. But cheap labor wasn't enough. To become a superpower, China needed to join the big leagues. They needed the WTO. 2001 was the turning point. When China joined the World Trade Organization, the trade barriers vanished. Suddenly, you could ship a container from Shanghai to Los Angeles for pennies. China made a deal with the world. We will destroy our environment. We will work 12-hour days. We will inhale the smog. And in exchange, we will make your stuff cheaper than you ever imagined. Walmart loved it. Apple loved it. You loved it. Cheap flat-screen TVs? Thank China. Cheap sneakers? Thank China. They became the world's factory. But they didn't just spend the money on Ferraris. They spent it on concrete. But before we get to the concrete, we have to mention the genius, or perhaps evil, financial trick that kept this machine running. You see, when China sold us all those cheap TVs and sneakers, they got paid in US dollars, trillions of them. Now normally, a country would take those dollars and exchange them for their own currency to spend at home. But if China did that, the value of the Chinese yuan would skyrocket and their labor wouldn't be cheap anymore. So, they did something unprecedented. They took those trillions of dollars and loaned them right back to the United States. They bought US Treasury bonds. Basically, China said to America, "Here is some cheap stuff, and here is a loan so you can afford to buy it." It created a perfect cycle. America got cheap goods and low interest rates. China got a massive manufacturing base and millions of jobs. But it also created a trap. China is now sitting on a mountain of US debt that they can't easily sell without crashing their own economy. They are the bank, but they are also a hostage to the dollar. Here is a stat that will break your brain. Between 2011 and 2013, China used more cement than the United States used in the entire 20th century. Read that again. 3 years versus 100 years. Sir, our GDP growth is slowing down. Build a bridge. But there's no river. Then build a tunnel. But nobody lives there. Build a city. They will come. And the crazy part? They did come. Western media laughed at China's ghost cities, entire metropolises with empty skyscrapers. But 10 years later, those cities are full. They built 25,000 miles of high-speed rail. You can go from Beijing to Shanghai in 4 hours. That's like New York to Chicago in the time it takes to watch The Batman. But trees don't grow to the sky. The same things that built China are now threatening to break it. Problem 1, the debt. Remember all those bridges to nowhere? They were built with borrowed money. China's real estate sector is a $60 trillion bubble, and it's starting to leak. To understand why this leak is terrifying, you have to look at how these apartments were sold. It wasn't like in the West, where you buy a finished house. In China, 90% of homes were sold pre-sale. That means families paid full price for an apartment that was just a hole in the ground, trusting the developer to build it 2 years later. Developers like Evergrande took that money, but instead of finishing the first building, they used the cash to buy new land to start a second project. It was a classic Ponzi scheme, fueled by the government's addiction to land sales. Local governments in China don't collect property tax, so selling land to developers is the only way they make money. For 20 years, everyone looked the other way because prices were going up. But when the music stopped in 2021, millions of Chinese citizens were left paying mortgages on apartments that might never be built. Imagine if your life savings were tied up in a concrete skeleton that has been abandoned for 3 years. That is the reality for millions of people right now. Problem 2, the people. The one-child policy was great for stopping hunger in the 80s, but now it's a disaster. China is running out of young workers. They got old before they got rich. I need 1,000 workers. There are no workers. Then pay them more. Then we aren't the cheapest anymore. Vietnam is cheaper. Oh no. And it gets worse. Sociologists call it the 4-2-1 problem. Because of the one-child policy, you now have a generation where one working-age adult has to support 2 retired parents and 4 retired grandparents. That is a mathematical nightmare. China is trying to fix it. They ended the one-child policy. Now they are begging people to have 3 kids. But the young generation isn't biting. Why? Because of something called 996 culture. Working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Young people in China are burned out. They call it tang ping, or lying flat. They are opting out of the rat race, refusing to buy houses and refusing to have kids. You can print money, you can build bridges, but you cannot print 20-year-old workers. China is no longer just the place that makes your plastic toys. They are building electric cars, launching space stations, and writing the algorithms that keep you addicted to your phone. They proved that you don't need democracy to get rich. You just need clear rules, hard work, and a government obsessed with growth at all costs. But the era of easy growth is over. The dragon has risen, but now it has to learn how to fly with heavy wings. And that leaves us with one final, terrifying question. If China's massive $60 trillion bubble actually pops, who holds the bag? It turns out a lot of that money came from Wall Street. And if you check your 401k, you might be more exposed to this collapse than you think.